This is Whiskey Whereabouts. I'm Tim, and this is 19-year single cask Aberfeldy. Why did I bring this bottle back from Scotland, and does it solve some of the problems that sort of plague this really poorly presented core range from this distillery? My whiskey journey has taken me to Scotland and back. I've explored whiskey education, tastings, and distilleries from Islay to Speyside. And now my journey continues here, with you, on Whiskey Whereabouts. So if you don't know, Aberfeldy is the big sort of single malt part of Dewar's, and these big, really well-known blended whiskeys. Their parent companies want there to be a location for the tourists to visit, even though they are made up of whiskeys from many different distilleries. So a lot of them are sort of the designated single malt homes for these different blends. Johnnie Walker has one in 4 different regions, and Aberfeldy is the home of Dewar's, and it is in a beautiful location. It's a pretty distillery, and I had the opportunity to try a couple of single cask versions of the Aberfeldy, and I grabbed one for a few reasons. And one is that I'm always intrigued when I get the opportunity to have a distillery exclusive or an independent bottling version of a whiskey that is really held back by poor presentation. When we think of Aberfeldy, most of us are going to think of that 12-year black and gold label. It's pretty much everywhere available in a terrible presentation, 40% chill filtered, fake color. So here, got an opportunity to have single cask at a decent ABV of 52%. They give you a little discount in the shop, and most of these distilleries, when you take the tour, you have a tasting, and I think I paid probably about £100 for this bottle, 19-year, 50+% whiskey, and I decided to bring it back as a sort of an example of what happens when we have a properly sort of presented, and in this case, a sort of single cask with a high ABV variant on this whiskey that is so common in that sort of terrible presentation. And in this case, we've got whiskey that's distilled in 2002, and it was bottled on November 19, 2021, 52% bourbon matured. So after giving this one plenty of time to open up, level's not too low. It hasn't been open that long, probably about a week. Now I'm ready to go in on the nose here with the single cask Aberfeldy. Okay, so the first thing about this whiskey is that it's not very hot at all. For 50% plus, I've had many whiskeys a lot more abrasive on the nose than this. I'm really going deep here, pulling a deep sort of inhale, and it just isn't hot. The flavors are also pretty mellow. This whiskey spent a lot of time in that cask in the warehouse, and it has a really wood sort of envelope around everything. It has a sort of an oak spice, oaky kind of wood top note, and then underneath, really strong with the apples. Very apple. It's not super tart green apple, but it's not super sweet or mealy either. It's sort of a middle sort of range, crisp. That orchard fruit really shining pretty brightly in the nose. Then there's the vanilla. Obviously, we know we got all this time in vanilla in this bourbon cask. We're going to have a bunch of vanilla notes. Going a little bit deeper, there's almost a tropical note. Yeah, like a coconut, and there's a pretty significant, down at the bottom of this nose, cigar box quality. That is almost a dry sort of tobacco leaf mixed with that sort of wood shavings, not quite cedar, but sawdusty kind of wood. Pretty nice, not the most complicated nose, not the biggest sort of richest nose, but this one is sort of a subtle, sort of sleepy, well matured whiskey. Rewards a little patience, a little time with it, but not that much complexity here. Neat on this whiskey. We'll come back to that. Let's go in on the palate now. Neat. Here's some signs of life, right? We've got, you know what I'm going to say, vanilla, right? But we've also got a pretty lively sort of black pepper, especially the longer you hold it. So the heat is showing its presence a little bit. It's giving it a little life. Now we're getting an introduction of some of that tannic bitter, but it is soaked in honey, so it never overwhelms. It's nice. There's a ginger that's pretty recognizable. one layer down after that first wave, that sort of sweet wave. Apart from the wood, not a lot of contrasting elements, and you are getting some of that sort of, like I said, that pepper coming with that liveliness from the ABV the longer you hold it. Again, not the most complex, but much richer here on the palate. It is an improvement over that very, very subtle nose. Let's go back for the finish. Neat. First real presence here of heat on the finish. You think it's medium. All this sort of flavor, sort of elements on that finish kind of rise and crest and begin to dissipate. And as you experience that, you're thinking, okay, that's it. And then it just kind of keeps going. Trying to reach toward long finish. Doesn't quite get there, but it's close. And with that, you're getting the sort of sweetness is sort of echoing, but the heat, you know, you take that first sip, that finish hits at higher ABV, certainly higher than it presented on the nose and probably even the palate, and takes, exhale a minute before you start speaking, right? Little bit of warmth, not too much. I talk about this sometimes. This is pretty subtle, but I could feel something kind of down into my chest. In terms of the flavor, it is the wood again, really oaky, but it's Mounds Bar. It is dark chocolate and coconut here on that finish. There's some of the tannin, there's some of the sort of black pepper kind of tingly, kind of from the heat that really stays in the center of the tongue as the finish kind of continues to develop and fade. But you're really left with a sweetness that is sort of, depending on what part of your mouth you're experiencing, you get that sort of rich honey sweet is kind of what the sort of the final note here. Offset a little bit, but very subtle. Not hugely bitter tannic, but just enough of the sort of oak to offset that. And that like I said, that chocolate coconut kind of on the sort of center of the tongue. That goes first, that fades first. Pretty nice notes that I'm describing. But again, we've got a couple of sweet notes and some oak, and we don't have that much more going on here. It's a single cask, so we haven't had the opportunity to kind of vat this with some other casks to achieve something, but this spirit has stood up nicely to that long sort of maturation period in the cask, and it's served well by this higher ABV. But what's going to happen, like I said, it's not that hot, but I'm more interested in what some water is going to unlock. Oh, and it's just transformed. This is why I pull this water out here when I do these reviews. Here, we've got some totally different notes now. The water has really opened this whiskey up. And again, I left this sit plenty of time, 20 minutes. It's not the neck pour, but the water is what it's taken to kind of awaken some more of these notes. I was hoping after the neck pour that getting the level down a little, letting it sit for a minute, I'd get a little bit more of this neat. And it's just not there. But with the water, yeah, cinnamon. There's caramel sweet now. It's kind of a little bit tighter in terms of that sort of sticky sort of caramel, a little bit salty element. The vanilla cream, it's obviously there. Orchard fruit's gone peach now. It was so appley before. Now it's much more peachy. It's brighter with the water. It's not hotter, but it's a little bit brighter, and it's not. These flavors are kind of dancing like along the top of the glass, whereas you really had to coax them out before. So the water's really awoken this whiskey, and it's showing some of this other dimension on the nose, which is exciting. Let's see on the palate now what the water does. It's not as rich and robust as it was before. Vanilla and caramel are still there. Not a lot, not the same level of richness and sort of this, those sweeter notes. There's no heat. There's no bitter. What's there from the oak is subtle, and you've got some pepper, a little bit. I wouldn't say it's been ruined, but it hasn't been elevated the way that the nose was. Let's see about the finish now with the water. Cinnamon and ginger forward now, develops into that sort of chocolate sweetness. It leaves a sort of nice mix, pretty subtle around the sort of sides of your mouth. It's pretty condensed into chocolate, I would say. Offset down the middle of the tongue, a little bit of the tannins, a little bit of that black pepper, a little bit of that spice. And there is a hint now introduced here on this finish of a mint as it develops and then begins to fade. It's a nice touch at the end. So the water has really opened up a lot of different sort of flavor elements here without killing the sort of base of it. It is, I would say, improved with the water. The water gives and water takes. It's always, you're always trading. But I think the nose and the finish both have really kind of brought in some new elements, and it's still robust enough. You know, it's a single cask whiskey, and it needs a little bit of coaxing. It needs a little bit to draw it out. It needs some time in the glass, probably experimenting with the water, needs a little work. And for that, and lacking a lot of complexity here, I'm gonna say it's a 4-glass whiskey. And this is another one of my single cask distillery exclusive whiskeys. It's long out of date. I'm not going to rate it on value. For what it's worth, I feel like it was a well-priced whiskey for the specs for what you're getting, if a little simple and a little not that complex. But if you enjoyed hearing about this whiskey, make sure you subscribe. You can hit this big button that's right over here. You'll remember we're still trying to hit that 2,500 subscriber mark. I got a very, very special bottle that I'm going to open when we get there, and I will see you on the next one.